social media, and we really have the will. We really mean we want change. We really mean that we want the corrupting influence of money not to call the shots anymore in our government. That we all working together across the political spectrum, that we can accomplish that. And I think this is the perfect storm brewing in this country.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, it'll leave these on the table in back here. Take one, please, and think about contributing whatever you can. Sorry about that.
Would you mind just passing those around instead of people that want them, because that's a little more, usually get a little more action.
I already given my $100 and I can't, he won't let me give me more.
No, we had to send her a check back. She gave us too much and we had to send it back.
If I could, I would, but you know, it's his rule. So $100 max.
You were saying perfect storm?
Yeah. You know, we've never, ever since they started polling regarding approval ratings of Congress, we have never seen anything close to an 8% approval rating of Congress. Majority of Democrats say that they disapprove even of Democrats in Congress. Majority of Republicans say they even disapprove of Republicans in Congress. The majority of people, when asked, say that they would prefer a system where we choose representatives in Congress at random, by lot, rather than the way that we're doing it now, given what we end up with in Congress. President Obama is now below a 50% approval rating. He's lost his passionate base. There's a really interesting article in this month's Rolling Stone about that. They've got all the technology, they've got all these campaign gurus, and yet they don't have the passionate base that they had last time around. And for good reason. He completely betrayed people that gave him so much of their trust and their hope. So we also know as a country, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Greens, Independents, all of us know that money has its way. That regardless of what the American people want and need, it doesn't happen if it goes counter to those who buy elections and who finance the lobbyists that can put on their blitzes. It was almost a given that this reform legislation recently that was proposed that would have cut back on government guarantees for tuition at for-profit colleges that were pumping out students who weren't getting adequately trained, they weren't getting qualified for jobs, that the government was saying, we're not going to guarantee those tuition loans anymore. Well, while that was being proposed, these for-profit colleges, and I don't know if you know who owns them, but it's the likes of, for instance, the Art Institute, the company that owns University of Phoenix, Goldman Sachs is the owner. I don't think most people understand this. It's a pretty good scam. You charge the kind of tuition, get these students to take out loans that are dischargeable in bankruptcy, and you have government guarantees.
Odious debt.
And so Congress was going to pass reform legislation. These for-profit colleges put on their lobbying blitz. They went out and got mostly the Democrats, people including former Speaker of the House, Dick Gephardt was one of them. They go out, they put on their lobbying blitz, get paid millions and millions of dollars, and that legislation is completely watered down. I only throw that out because it's one of the most recent examples of this. One of the clearest examples, of course, is why are we the only nation in the industrialized world that doesn't provide essential health care for all of our citizens? The only single nation among the developed world. You just follow the money. We know what it is. It's the money from the for-profit insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies And it's not only that we don't provide coverage for everybody, but we pay more than double the average of the rest of the industrialized world. And our medical outcomes are far worse than most industrialized nations. Does anybody here know where we rank
37.
among the industrialized world for the death of new babies? We are the lowest next to Latvia. Latvia is the only developed nation that's worse than the United States.
How many?
Pardon me?
Do you know how many there are in total?
How many there are total? No, total. I've got the rankings. But it's because of the lack of health care insurance. This has such horrendous consequences to the American people. Women that don't have adequate coverage for prenatal and neonatal treatment. And we have also one of the highest maternal death rates in the industrialized world as well. So that's where we get with this kind of government. And so I know there are those, and if those of you who support taking a very different approach, I know that you hear from people, because I hear from a lot of people all the time, this spoiler issue. But what about taking votes away from Obama? And it might mean that Mitt Romney is our next president. People are still in trauma after 2000. This mistaken belief that it was Ralph Nader that somehow lost that election that Al Gore ran. When you think about how ludicrous that is, now the American people actually, there were enough of them that voted for George Bush that he won in all those other states, including Al Gore's home state of Tennessee. And then the United States Supreme Court down party lines stole the election and wouldn't even allow Florida to continue the recount. But that's not the real argument. I wouldn't even raise that argument when people talk about the spoiler issue. The real point is, if we cave into that fear of the lesser of two evils not prevailing every election, we'll never see change. As long as we vote for the Republican or Democrat, we're voting for a continuation of status quo. We're voting for maintenance of this corrupt, perverse system, this plutocracy that we have where the wealthy call all the shots. So if we're really going to make a difference, we need to make that leap and say we are going to vote for a third party who stands up for our interests, who stands up for getting the corrupt influence of money out of our system, who stands up for a constitutional amendment overruling the Citizens United case, who stands up for public financing, who stands up against these wars, who stands up against the stranglehold of the military-industrial complex on our nation. And I would also suggest, as you spread the word, because this is all about networking and building a real people's movement, urge people to look at my record, not just what people say. I mean, we experienced that with Obama. He had a great public relations campaign. I used to always tell my friends 4 years ago, but look at what the person did in his life. There's nothing that backs any of this up. And it turned out to be true. What was his goal? So please, take a look at my record. Take a look at what I've done, not only in public office, but in my own personal life, where I've shown my commitment. And you'll see that I've never backed off. I was the only big city mayor in this country that was advocating impeachment. And I did it aggressively, and I did it around the country. I was the one who worked with Congressman Conyers to get hearings held in the House Judiciary Committee on abuses of executive power. We were probably the greenest city in the country. I carried on a very aggressive climate crisis, bringing dozens and dozens of mayors into the fold, getting them with best practices. We reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 31% in our military operations in 3 years. I was ranked by the Human Rights Campaign as one of the top 10 straight advocates of the gay and lesbian community. I was very proud to issue executive orders for equal benefits, regardless of sexual orientation, for equal employment opportunities, regardless of sexual orientation. Abby said that she was at the Gay Pride Parade when I was the Grand Marshal at the Pride Parade, and I loved it every year. You can imagine in Salt Lake City, the mayor flying the rainbow flag over the city and county building. So, and I ran for Congress in 1996, and actually, I mean, think about it, 96, nobody, this was considered a pretty fringe issue at the time. Now, thank God, it's very mainstream, and we're going to see marriage equality nationwide before long in this country. But I was standing up for marriage equality in 1996, and that was the principal issue that led to my defeat for my congressional race, but I never regretted that for 1 second. So, anyway, please take a look at our website, voterocky.org. Click on News on the top banner. You'll see a lot of the interviews that have been held. And I was asked earlier about the lack of media coverage. Actually, we're seeing a lot of interest now by the media. And I think that once the Republican nomination process is finished, I think we're going to see a whole lot of interest. And it's because the mainstream media now recognizes that the majority of their audience wants to see and hear an alternative. They want something other than the Republican or Democrat elected ultimately, but they also want to hear from those alternatives in the meantime. I'm also hoping that we can gather people together, regardless of any differences that we might have, that we can find our commonality and present ourselves under one unified banner. That doesn't mean just one alternative party necessarily, but all of us working together to defeat this duopoly of the Republican and Democratic parties. And I'm here tonight. There's going to be a debate for those who are seeking the nomination of California's Peace and Freedom Party. And although I'm a co-founder of the Justice Party, it's virtually impossible in California for the party to get on the ballot. We formed in mid-December. California has this absolutely absurd deadline of January 3rd for parties to get on the ballot. And it would have taken over 1 million signatures for us to get to that point. Or I think it was 103,000 people
would have to register
to change their voter registration as members of the Justice Party.